They say you could never go back home, but here I am, back in the States, thrifting the Goodwill Outlets. Hi, and welcome to Well-Read Wardrobe. I'm Christin, an American now living in Australia, and this is a channel mostly about secondhand fashion, designers, and reselling, both here in Australia and America. A lot has changed since I moved from Seattle to Sydney. As I mentioned in my last video, after taking a long pause from posting, I've gone from a full-time to an occasional reseller. With this new change and a stable paycheck, I found that the passion for thrifting, or op shopping as we call it here in Australia, and salvaging secondhand items has returned. We can chat about the downside of moving to a new country at the age of 40, starting over, job hunting, being forcibly scaled back in your own business, rejection, and the depression that was looming to take over in that time in another video. I'm still trying to process all that myself. For now, let's enjoy the views and the shopping back in the Pacific Northwest. Many of you commented that op shopping, or thrifting as I grew up calling it, is very different in Australia to America, and even more so when I'm shopping in the city versus further out. And I agree. It's the same in the States. Different places have different opportunities, and it can take time to figure out what works best depending on where you are. I was stoked to have this opportunity to return to the States and shop brands that I know and places that I've missed. But the real focus of this trip was to see family. Specifically, my daughter was graduating from high school, so of course I had to return. I was lucky enough to land a position that let me leave for overseas travel almost immediately after starting. The 24 hours of door-to-door travel, layovers, and full flights would have been worth it regardless. But coming back with some fun finds for myself, and some to help pay for future trips, are definitely a bonus and added to the thrill. This is legitimately how I enjoy spending my time. Shopping other people's discarded treasures. One American sourcing opportunity that I do miss particularly a lot is shopping the Goodwill Outlet bins. I was so excited to get to dig in the bins again, especially with my bestie Melissa, also known as the Thrifty Broad previously, who is still going strong in her reselling business while also pursuing true crime commentary on her new YouTube channel, The Commentary Broad. The bins are a pay-by-weight warehouse where items are tossed into category bins and put on the sales floor for customers to sift through. Typically, a new rotation comes out hourly. This will differ depending on where you're shopping. The closest comparison I have to date in Australia is the U-Turn outlet in Punchbowl, but there are several notable differences. The bins are practically a competitive sport in some cities and are typically very hot or freezing cold, depending on the season, and are an all-day experience for most resellers, with items rotating every hour or so, again, location dependent. I have sourced regularly in both downtown Seattle and north in Everett, and have visited bins in Las Vegas, Nevada, as well as Houston, Texas. Side note, Houston features 12 Goodwill Outlet bins. Everything really is bigger in Texas. While a portion of outlet items have been pulled from the racks of Goodwill locations nearby, and you can tell by the tags still attached that they've gone through the 4 to 6 week cycle of discounts, and were pulled typically after the $1.99 clearance day has come and gone the Monday prior. Not all items have ever seen the sales floor until now, here, at the last stage before landfills and overseas dumping. Some items are still in their original garbage bags from the donator, brought in raw, and anything could be inside. These are the most exciting finds, the clothes that come from one closet, at least in my opinion. Because I was limited in space and weight, I had to be extra picky. My cart changed repeatedly in each store as I scanned for flaws, searched for comparables, and information on each and every item. I had thread-up labels on hand in case I struck gold and there was a lot of inventory available to me and not enough room in my suitcases, but in the end they weren't needed, which was a bummer, but always a possibility. In my head, I was chanting, "Anthropology," like a plea to the gods as I entered each store, waiting for prayers to be answered. Anthropologie is another store I do miss, both for reselling and personal clothing and home goods. If I had an extra day to spare in Seattle, I would have liked to visit Anthro in the city, like I did back in stressful days in the office circa 2019. A quick walk to Anthropologie over lunch really could calm the nerves and get my head back on straight, even if I didn't buy anything. I did manage to find some of the brands I was hoping for, as well as some surprises that were pulled on style, and then comps proved a good enough investment to bring back home. This new with tags headband is from Anthropologie, and I would not have been able to know that if it didn't have the tag still attached. I could only laugh when I pulled it from a bin and showed Melissa. I was asking for Anthro and small items, so I guess this fits both requirements. This Banana Republic white denim dress was a full price item from Goodwill, and a black tag at that, marked at $24.97 US dollars. Okay, just doing this quickly in my head, guys, I think that's around 35 Australian. I'll put it up on the screen. But a quick search in the store showed it was a pretty current style, and it was still selling at David Jones here in Australia for $349. Because of that, I brought it back home with me. Being on opposite seasons can definitely be a perk to shopping in a different hemisphere. There was not a lot of competition when I was looking at long sleeves. I was also able to nab this cute cream-colored Lululemon winter hat at the bins because no one else cared to look at it because summer was supposedly coming. Thrifting on holiday is actually one of my favorite activities, even when I'm not actively reselling. I once redesigned a whole room in my house while on vacation in Charleston, South Carolina, because I was so inspired by the cottage we had rented by the beach. I piled the back of my minivan with second-hand scores to bring back as souvenirs, literally from the Goodwill. Second-hand shops are just my thing. This trip, Sydney, the daughter, not the city, same name, and I spent our night staying up way too late to cram in every minute of togetherness as we could, eating Tim Tams, watching our favorite YouTube channels, and playing Animal Crossing. Family is always going to be the priority with trips back to the States. But lucky for me, she and a lot of my other family and friends also love thrifting, which made fitting it in easy. Fitting things back into my suitcase to take back to Australia? Decidedly not as easy. Planning ahead, I brought one large suitcase that was only half packed and a carry-on with gifts that only had to travel one way. A handmade Hello Kitty bouquet came all the way from the Glebe markets, as well as some art from local vendors and plenty of Aussie snacks for my family to try. Freddo frogs were a hit, but I forgot the Vegemite. Pricing is what I remember it to be from this area. High, but holding. With some good deals still to be had, especially if you could go on a sales day. Limited on time, I just went when I could. Having the Sydney comparison now, I feel like these prices aren't too bad, even if I did have to put back most of the finds on the rack due to comps and limited space. The bins are clearly the winner, with the price point being under $2 a pound. That's equivalent to just under half a kilogram for about $3 Australian. 3 to 5 adult t-shirts would weigh in at about a pound, just to give you an example. And a pair of adult jeans might weigh 1 to 2 pounds. The trade-off is the time investment you need to dig through the treasures, something I was extra low on while traveling. This cloth and leather belt with a metal buckle comes in at just under a pound, and the Timberland tall boots at 3. Unfortunately, the boots didn't make the final cut. Yes, I did buy them, and now they're waiting for me in Seattle with some other treasures of my own that haven't made it after a year. I did manage to fit in 2 pairs of shoes for resale in my suitcase. First up, these really supple leather ankle boots from Saks Fifth Avenue in fairly good condition, just a little bit of toe wear, but seriously soft. After that, I had to get these. These are Free People, and with all that talk about Anthropologie, are you even surprised I made room for these little guys? They were $14.50. Last but not least, another bins item. This dress is Anthropologie and actually still had its matching belt. I can't believe it survived the bins. I really had to rein myself in from picking up too much home decor to bring back. It was just going to be too heavy and risky with breakage issues bringing it overseas. The same thing I knew from my move 9 months prior, but I couldn't help but look down every aisle full of glass and vintage breakables and wish otherwise. This pair of vintage candlestick holders did make it home, only $3.99 US, as well as this brass paper candlestick holder, which was only $3. And this original, unused Twilight Woods lotion from Bath & Body Works, only $7.99 US for a mixed goodie bag. I bought the whole thing knowing that I was only pulling the full-size lotion for myself and giving the other items to my daughter to pick through. It smells exactly like 2009, and I'm not mad about it. Also, add in this wooden shelf, originally from World Market, that I had to declare at customs, and a vintage golden frame made in Italy, both for me and from Goodwill, as well as a leather portfolio from the bins. In pre-planning, I knew I'd be on the hunt for a second large suitcase while in Seattle, so I only had to pay for it to travel one way. This worked out for me on a quick Goodwill trip while my daughter had graduation rehearsal nearby. I also needed room for items that had been stored in Seattle for the past 9 months, like my puffer coat, which was in fact super useful as I was traveling in June. Summer in Seattle and winter in Sydney, but both cities had cold, gray, rainy days, and I needed a coat on both sides. I had a cropped white one in storage, and I found a black long one for $10 US, 15 Australian, and for this particular trip, I had flown Delta Airlines, partners with Virgin. A second large case going one way cost $100 US, that's 150 Australian, and this particularly large case was allowed, up to 70 pounds, measuring 62 inches or 158 centimeters, which is length, width, and height all added together. That's the best deal I've come across for luggage allowances so far. Much better than other airlines that charge a higher price while their sizing is smaller. It's definitely something worth considering before I book my next visit. As expected, time flew by. In between the trips to the Rocky Beach, seeing Inside Out 2 in the theaters, breakfast with my dad, and sushi dinner with my mom, spending as many moments with my daughter as were possible, I made 3 thrifting trips. Went to Value Village, Goodwill, and the Goodwill Outlet bins. This trip was just what I needed, and I'm so thankful for all the memories. Next trip to the US is to the East Coast, Georgia, to see my son graduate from his military training. I definitely have room in my carry-on to bring you with me, so don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you know when we take that trip. That's it for this chapter. See you next time.